modern day Los Angeles, California, helicopters overhead, tactical vehicles in the streets, and ICE agents executing coordinated immigration raids while military style force is unleashed on protesters. Y'all, this ain't a war zone. This is America.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
And today on the Special Report, we are asking who gave the order? Who and what are they trying to silence? And is this just another big, beautiful distraction? And how close are we to normalizing the unthinkable? See, I want to be clear. This is not a drill. Over the past 3 days, ICE agents have conducted multiple raids in predominantly immigrant neighborhoods across Los Angeles. Families were torn apart, terrorized, and as news spread, protesters gathered peacefully. But what met them wasn't law enforcement. It wasn't escalation. It was military-style control of the crowds, rubber bullets. And if you're asking why now, why LA, why so violent, you are not alone. Those are the questions so many Americans are asking, and particularly those of us who live in Los Angeles, who are getting calls from our neighbors, who are getting calls from out of town folks wondering if we are okay. And we're scratching our heads saying, why are you asking? Of course we are okay. 53 people have been arrested over the course of a couple of days. More people were arrested during the celebration the last time the Lakers won the playoffs. But yet this hysteria has just swept through the country and this disinformation about the state of Los Angeles. Joining me now is Alan Orr. He's an immigration attorney and one of the nation's most trusted voices on immigration justice and civil liberties. And I'm so happy to have Alan joining me today. So much is happening. Let me just first say thank you, Alan. Thank you for the type of practice that you engage in on a regular. We need immigration lawyers. We need civil liberties fighters like you more than ever. I just first want to start with how are you doing and how is the immigration bar responding to what you are witnessing with your eyes from afar in terms of what's happening in Los Angeles?
Yeah, so what's happening in Los Angeles isn't in isolation. There have been other sort of small incidents in different places across the nation that immigration attorneys have sort of been addressing. My organization is 17,000 lawyers, and that's really not a lawyers to deal with the numbers and the capacity of people that sort of need the help right now. And also people think of the immigration bar as a pro bono bar, so that many lawyers are doing more work and not getting reimbursed or paid to do the duty of sort of just protecting someone's civil liberties at this point in time. So it's a very stressful time, but it's an important time as we reach forward and define our nation.
And as you said, Alan, what we're witnessing here in Los Angeles isn't isolated. We know Donald Trump made a commitment. He ran on the promise of, quote unquote, closing the borders, of arresting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of immigrants and deporting them, sending them back, sometimes to countries that they've never, ever lived in, have no affiliation with. And we're seeing that being played out before our very eyes. But talk to us about what an ICE raid looks like, because I think a lot of people aren't even sure what it is that we are witnessing.
So let's go back in historical context, because I think it's important to know that in general, HSI does do worksite enforcements, but generally it's a letter, and you're given 3 days to produce the documents to prove they have work authorization on your site. There have been some raids in the past, meatpacking factories, a pallet company, but they are far and few between. And when they do that, they were 20 to 30 arrests at one site, and disruption of the school system because the parents had their kids at school, or the husband was arrested, so the breadwinner was sort of taken, and it didn't play over well in the media. So that happened for both, it happened mostly for Obama, actually, to be honest about it. There was a lot of sort of turmoil about Obama doing these sort of worksite enforcement actions that were disruptive. In general, ICE does not do these type of raids to pick up a single individual. You don't have 6 or 7 cops arresting a student on the street. This is uncommon in the practice of immigration law, and this is a choice. It is okay And it is the law that if someone is undocumented in this country, that they are subject to deportation. There are ways to do deportation that does not have this cost and this impact on the culture. So as many people talk about de-escalation in LA, one of the very first things that could de-escalate is that ICE could remove themselves from the street because they don't have to do enforcement this way. They don't have to pick up someone at the school or at the work site. They can have them come in and then remove them in the fashion in which we have done it for decades since I've been practicing immigration law. So the way that ICE is doing enforcement now are photo ops. It's part of the sort of scene of saying he's doing this mass deportation, but no one's really looking at the expense. Think about how expensive it is to have 6 officers find one person who's a 6-year-old student, or to try to get a parent and you wind up with a high school honor student in Massachusetts, or you get a couple of arrests. I mean, I think there's been 100 arrests right now in LA County. So, and people don't understand what LA County is. LA County is bigger than LA to sort of understand the distinction between who's the mayor of what and who's controlling what. So that's another problem that they have. They're running a very small picture of LA County and saying, oh, the whole place is on fire, when in fact it's just a couple of locations, which are choices. All of these things are choices and situations that the government can do differently, and is expenses to the taxpayer. And I don't know why the taxpayers aren't waking up and saying, not only is this against what has happened in the past, but this is a very expensive way to enforce immigration.
Yeah, let me break down some of what you said, Alan. All very great points. First of all, as you said, LA is massive. I don't know, with 4,000 square miles. So when you talk about what's happening in downtown LA, where the focus has been for the last couple of days, if you drive around LA right now, there are communities that don't even know what's happening downtown because they are so far removed geographically. And when you think of the number of people, you said 100 people have been arrested. We know about 53 protesters have been arrested. There are 11 to 13 million people in the county of Los Angeles. So when you think of those numbers, it's such a minuscule number of people. In LA City, it's over 2 to 3 million people. So again, we're talking about very, very small numbers of people being impacted. But we're hearing, and we know that Donald Trump has deployed 2,000 National Guards and then another 700 U.S. Marines. So over 2,700 people deployed for a city that already has 8,000 to 9,000 police officers in the city of Los Angeles, not to mention the county that has a sheriff's department, and we have a state department of highway patrol. So LA and California, we are not at a loss for law enforcement agencies and bodies to address any protest. But I want to go back to the raid of this business that happened in the garment district downtown Los Angeles. How would ICE know that a particular company, Alan, has so-called illegal immigrants working in that company so that they could even, raid that company? How do they get that information typically?
So, I mean, this is the government knows or has reason to demise where undocumented people are across the United States based on Social Security payments, payroll payments, and they've known for years. Mismatch, Social Security mismatch. If there's a Social Security number being in several locations, one of them is either wrong or all of them are either wrong. So this is one of the equity arguments that immigration attorneys use for people who've been here for 10 to 15 years. If you've known they've been here, they've been paying taxes, and you did nothing about them, there should be a toll that runs on that time. If you took no action, then these individuals should be able to go. The reason why they've turned to these sort of factory locations is because he promised to get all the worst of the worst out, and he can't find them. So when you can't find the worst of the worst and you need to remove 3,000 people a day, then you go to low-hanging fruit. And where's low-hanging fruit? The places that you saw sort of where these arrests were happening in LA, at an immigration court where people don't have documentation, they're going in, they're trying to do the right thing and get their status. They get their case dismissed, you arrest them as soon as they walk out of the door. Factories across the board, the United States in landscaping, construction, food services, and these large sort of clothing stores, there's always someone there that might not have documentation. What one should ask themselves when we see this happen is, well, what happened to the owners of these organizations? Why are we not seeing them sort of do this perp walk that we have these individuals doing? Because they must have known. Where is that repercussion for the individual who is harboring, right? They're trying to say California is harboring, but that actual employer is harboring if they knew those people were undocumented. And you see them do nothing about that, say nothing about it, and tax no one, because it is their friends, right? It is the Donald Trumps of the world who are hiring these undocumented people for their golf courses, for their construction sites, right? There was a major case in New York City with Donald Trump had one of his sites inspected and almost 30% of the people did not have documentation.
Yeah, let's say that louder for the people in the back of the room, that there are employers, and in most cases, these are wealthy employers, many of them probably members of the GOP party, many of them, as you said, probably friends of Donald Trump or have contributed somehow to his campaign, that hire these individuals. You're right, we never hear anything about these CEOs and these business owners who have to process these documents, that are engaged in paying these individuals, oftentimes, as you said, knowing that the documentation they've submitted is false. Not a peep, not a word about prosecuting or calling out or putting those folks on Front Street, but yet let's dehumanize the poor person who's just trying to work, put food on the table for their family. Okay, another issue that's really been bothering me, Alan, is this notion that you hear people say, well, if you're illegal or if you've committed a crime, if you're a criminal, because Donald Trump promised that all these immigrants were rapists and murderers and drug dealers and the worst of the worst, that's who he's going after. How does, again, ICE know if you are a convicted felon if they've not given you a due process hearing or used any legal process before they pick you up, detain you, and ship you off someplace?
So Homeland Security in itself was a massive organization that is a mess, right? Sort of talking between agencies. So there are operations where in many places someone could have been arrested for a DUI, DWI as a teenage, or having a drug possession is more common to happen. And it'd be on the record. And for example, if you lock up someone in your local jail, for example, I'm in Tennessee, and you call ICE to pick them up, it may take weeks for you to get there. Our local jail doesn't have a 24-hour person working there, so they can't lock people up for longer than a day because it's a violation of their civil rights. So therefore, they would have to let them go. And then the paper trail will sort of have to follow between them. So the question primarily is there are paper trails. But the answer that you're asking me right now is, what is the way in which we decide if someone is documented or not documented? And that is due process. If they don't go through the system, through the rules of a court hearing and saying, this is who you are, let's see what your papers, how'd you get here, we can't wait to equities. They may have an asylum claim. They may have a claim against torture. They may have a claim against withholding, such like Mr. Abrego did. So there's tons of relief that's in an immigration court that could happen. And so you have to run the immigrants through the court. What we don't have is sort of a banana court where the officer, let's talk about construction first. In immigration, there is the judge and the officer, and they both work for the Department of Justice. That generally doesn't happen in any other level of our administration of justice because you don't want the cop and the judge working together, and that's how they sort of are arresting people at courthouses. But in this case, you have the ICE arresting someone and saying they're documented without going before the judge to determine if they're documented or not because they don't have the whole file. And a primary case of that is Mr. Garcia. So apparently he had a document saying that he could not be removed. They didn't check that with the Department of Labor, and with the Department of Justice. In addition, they had this claim that's in Tennessee that came up, 4 months later that they didn't check on. If they would have gone through the process, they would have discovered that perhaps and discovered what the issues were, and he would have had a resolution and they could have removed him and he would not have the claims that he has today. And so all we say, and this is how I sort of explain to people who have not been to law school, that due process are the rules of the game. It is like playing Uno. And if everybody's not playing by the same rules, then you can't say you won the game if you didn't follow the rules.
So in a perfect world, it's kind of like probable cause. So ICE might have some probable cause to pick you up, take you to a detention center, but just like a person that's picked up and arrested, they then go to jail and then they show up at a court for arraignment. You're saying this person that's been detained should then show up in an immigration court and there should be some legal process, some hearing before there's a determination that they are in this country illegally or not.
Absolutely. And so when the Trump administration took over, they fired a cohort of hundreds of immigration judges. So it's not about sort of clearing the immigration courts because you wouldn't fire people if you were doing that. But in addition to that, I think it's a little bit different than what we're sort of saying because there's a pretext to this. How do you suspect that someone is undocumented or here without suspicion? It has to be based on either their appearance or the languages, which are protected classes. So therefore, people are basically doing show me your paper kind of enforcement around the clock here. And that's the real issue that we have. There's a new rule that went in about—
Let me stop you right there, Alan, because I get asked that question all the time. So if you are just out doing your business at a grocery store, at a laundromat, and an ICE officer walks up to you and says, show me your papers, what do you say? Like, what are your legal rights in that situation?
So The answer is you should show them your papers. But the point is, and have the justification deal with afterwards, because most likely, if you are documented, it's going to be a quick end to the situation. The officer's going to walk away and you can report it because you can say, well, why did you pick me in this case? But in some cases, you're not going to have the documentation and you will not have this registration that's required now under the Trump administration, and you'll be removed. So the answer in most cases is don't have a conversation with the low-level officer. Many of the people who are on the street right now enforcing immigration are not immigration officers, so they aren't trained in immigration, nor the Marines, nor the people who are coming from the National Guard. So therefore, they're not going to have a conversation with you about TPS, protective status, asylum, you have a pending case. That's not the place to have it. So in most cases, what we say is, if there's a situation, meaning you're not pulling out your passport, just remain silent until you have an attorney to help you, because anything you say can be used against you. And that's the best way to start building the case. It's best not to engage in the conversation if there's going to be an issue when someone stops you.
But I want to be real clear. So we, meaning you, the immigration expert, is advising people to carry their documentation with them in the event they're stopped at the laundromat, the grocery store, or wherever. It's better to show your legal documents and hopefully shut it down than to then try to engage in any kind of conversation with these low-level officers.
That's exactly right. Because the way that it works right now, I mean, there is a law that requires you to carry your documentation, especially if you're a foreign national. But even as an American, in most states, there is some rule that says you need to have some form of identification on you at all times. So, and now with this registration, immigrants are required to have it on them. The issue that we have with the bar is that the only way, I mean, if you walk into a room and there are 100 people, who are you going to check? You're not going to check the people who are Caucasian, right? You're going to check people who are speaking Spanish, or people who are brown, or people who are black. And that's just the situation that it is. And in sort of doing this over-policing, you're going to over-police these neighborhoods. And who lives in these brown neighborhoods? Well, also black people. And what they're going to do is catch everybody up, just like they did at Stop and Frisk in New York, and start arresting black people for minor things that they couldn't have been arrested for before, just because they're in the neighborhood trying to arrest people, getting their numbers up.
Okay, great. Understand that. Now, what about business owners? I'm a business owner, lots of business owners. There obviously was a business downtown Los Angeles that was the subject of this raid. If an ICE officer knocks on your door as a business and says, I want to come in to do a check to see if you have any illegal immigrants in your place of business, do you have to let them in, or do they have to have a valid warrant signed by a judge?
They need a valid warrant signed by a judge. So there are two types of warrants in this world. There's an administrative warrant and one by a judge. And the easiest way to distinguish between the two of them is, if it's an administrative warrant, it has immigration at the top of it. It'll be some DHS or UCIS or some government. If it is a regular warrant signed by a judge, it's going to have your state on it. It's going to say whatever your state is, and it's going to have the judge's name on it. And that's the warrant they need to be able to get into your establishment in the back area. There are caveats. If you are McDonald's and you're open for business, you can't keep them out of your lobby area where the general public is. But you can have a sign that this is employee only or staff only, so they know which areas are restricted. So you can't keep officers out of public areas unless, for example, they come in and they disrupt your public. You can ask them to leave just like any other person. You can ask to leave. If they're causing, please leave they cannot sort of stay there. If they're causing a disruption, they have to leave because they don't have a right to be there if they don't have a valid warrant. In addition to this sort of situation that's going on, we have seen that in a lot of cases, ICE is forcing their way in. So for example, ICE is at the home, or just recently, there's a story about the school in California that an ICE agent came in and said that they had the approval of a parent to get into the building to get to the kid, and all of this stuff was fake. So the best instance is at a business is to have an area that's sort of closed off and marked restricted for employee only. That's the best case. If they show up at your home, the best case is to open nothing. They can slide the warrant under the door or send it to you some other way. Don't open the door, don't open the window. Have your kids ready and know that if they go to the door, no one should be answering the door now in any of these establishments that's not an adult, to make sure that the person outside the door is not someone trying to get in to enforce ICE or some other language and they have a warrant. Because once you open the door, that's the problem.
Yeah, that's the case of the 6-year-old in California. Just a heartbreaking story of because the school is, they have areas where you can't enter a school beyond a certain point unless you are a student or a faculty member. So people aren't able to just walk on to school campuses because of obviously the safety of, they shouldn't be, safety of the children. But apparently they lied to administrators at the school about the parent giving permission to come on to access the child. So if you were at a school, what advice would you give school administrators? Because that's very scary.
just no more public areas for anyone. I mean, which there are many schools that don't allow people in the building at all. You have to outside, you deal with the camera, and then everything's over the camera. And then if someone's not familiar to you, then you confirm it. If they say they were the parents, then you call the parents to do that. But a greater sort of message to people who are getting ready to gear up for the midterms, or just people who are concerned about this pride. What possible threat does a K through 12 kid have to you right now in the society? If that's your largest fear, then you probably need to go talk to a psychiatrist or some other issue, because that kid is not your problem, learning their ABCs in their education.
Well, what we hear, Alan, from some of these MAGA voters is, they make this assumption that that kid sitting in that classroom is somehow sucking up resources that otherwise would be available, quote unquote, to American citizens and to American kids. So we hear that argument all the time.
I think this is an important conversation to have. Let's have it. Let's have it in this moment, because I want to have it again. This is what we saw in New York and Chicago when they were busing people from Texas, saying they're taking our resources, they're taking our gym, they're taking our housing, blah, 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 taking our food, right? And so I asked all those people, all the people of color, all the Black people who were so animated about it, saying they were taking stuff from them at the beginning, has the government now given you those things? Have you seen any of the housing? Have you seen any of the food programs? You have not. So they were not taking anything that was yours, right? It was something that was being given to them, as is clearly they can give it to you as well. So this conversation of there's a sum zero pie and what that other poor person has is taking something from you is kind of a false fiction. And the concept that in someone's school, someone's taking something that they can't be taken away from you. I ask you, do we have birthing quotas? Can you only have one kid? No. Someone can have 6 kids and someone else can have 2 kids. Or they can have no kids, like I have no kids, and I'm paying the same taxes for someone to go to school and not even using the facility. So that's sort of a crazy, arbitrary argument that you're going to have, when in fact we know there's a population problem that we have and we need workers to continue in the system. And there's really no clear denomination about that, because your neighbor has 6 kids and you have 1 kid, and you're not arguing about their 4 other kids getting more than your 1 kid is getting. So that's sort of a false fiction. And for Black people specifically, this concept that, oh my God, they're taking something away from me, just doesn't bear out in reality when you see that now they're not in Chicago, they're not in New York. Has the federal government come in and give you housing or food vouchers or anything else? No, they're cutting those programs. So that's sort of a weird thing. In addition to that, when they were doing the local funding in Chicago and New York, the money was going in that community, right? It was going to the local stores, local restaurants. Now with the private prisons, the money's going back into Trump's donors. So they're taking your taxpayer dollars and funneling it back into billionaire and millionaire profits.
Yeah, no, completely false narratives and these binary choices that people try to present. Most of these arguments we know are illogical. Unfortunately, we have millions of people who bought into this brainwashing that's happened around immigration and the dehumanizing of immigrants, many of whom are our neighbors, our friends, the folks that we greet every day at the cleaners, at the grocery store, at the laundromat. I do want to talk about this escalation. So we saw over the weekend Donald Trump flexing. He's been dying to get into a fight with a Democratic governor, a Democratic city, so that he could have this optic. And you have people like Stephen Miller saying that there's been an invasion of insurrectionists, of a mob that's attacked LA. And we know that that's just extreme disinformation, that there's been no mob, there's been no insurrection that's taken place in LA. There have been protesters who have a right to exercise their First Amendment rights. And yes, some protesters, perhaps, I don't know who set the fires. We don't know who set the fires, but there have been some fires set of some vehicles. And clearly, if somebody is engaged in criminal activity, they need to be held accountable, just like Trump and his administration. If they are engaged in criminal activity, they need to be held accountable. But what do you make of Trump just pushing his presidential power beyond any limits, calling in 2,000 National Guardsmen and then 700 U.S. Marines into Los Angeles, California, when the governor of California and the mayor of Los Angeles were adamant that that kind of show of power was just going to escalate rather than de-escalate a potentially volatile situation?
So I think it's unfounded in American law. So as a lawyer, we can look at the history of how this title has been used before Title 10, and that we see that it hasn't been used in this way in the past, except in the 60s, to protect the rights of citizens who are in a Southern situation who are being denied sort of civil rights. So it's sort of out of the box. But in this conversation, I want to explore what happened in Texas, right? Texas is a good example to sort of show what this military phenom happens, because they use the National Guard, they had their own little Lone Star State thing, and they also have Marines sort of trolling the budget at billions of dollars a month worth of supplies. the officers did not want to be there. It did not make us more ready. It hurt morale, right? And so the expense and the morale should be a big conversation. And they didn't have the housing and the food to sort of have those individuals there for the time they did. So when you shift that conversation that happened in Texas that was super expensive, and now Texas is trying to get their money back through this bill, right? Through the bill that's in the Senate right now to get refunded for all these things they decided to do on their own, these expenses. The same thing is true in California. Because these people and the insurrection act has not happened, the military nor the National Guard cannot arrest anyone because they're not empowered to, and cannot do any enforcement. They are there basically to hold the bags and to stand the line and to protect the ICE officers as they do these raids that don't have to happen. So all these things are financial choices that are happening that make up a movie show for his reality television to say, I'm being strong on immigration because he's failing at national policy right now. The tariffs things aren't done, and the bill is not passed with the House. And if you remember from the convention, they all held up signs that say mass deportation, mass deportation. And now that Carol, their friend, is being deported, now there's a problem. Or the Latinos for Trump, now that their family's being deported and they're being cut off through these travel bans, now it's an issue. No, he told you who he was, you voted for it, and now you're getting it. And the price tag at the end of the day should be the thing that discourages every Republican for doing this. Also, it sets a precedent that if there is and when there is the next Democratic person in office, will they be able to do these same things to all of these states out there, Arkansas and Alabama and all these places who want to sort of have their own way at civil rights? They would not want them to overstep the bounds. So I'm happy that the suit was filed. I haven't had a chance to digest it yet, but I think it's a very powerful suit based on the precedent that there has been before.
Yeah, so this is the lawsuit that Governor Newsom has filed because, let's be clear, there has been no president that has called up the National Guard over the objection of a governor since 1960s, Lyndon B. Johnson. So this presidential calling up of the National Guard is outrageous. And when you compare it, Alan, let's go back to the insurrection, the January 5th, 6th insurrection. So we watched our Capitol literally be invaded, not the protesters downtown on the streets of Los Angeles. Yes. And Donald Trump refused to call up the National Guard. He tried to blame Nancy Pelosi. He tried to blame the mayor of D.C. But let's be clear, there's no governor of D.C. And the guard that governs D.C. is under the purview of the president. That's right. And he is the only person that had the power to call in the National Guard, not Nancy, not the mayor. But yet he refused to do so. And within hours almost in Los Angeles, he calls up the National Guard and starts just, pushing this false narrative that somehow the city was out of control and that the governor and the mayor had lost control, and only he could save it. So we know Trump has a history of creating chaos and then trying to swoop in like some superhero, like he's the only one that can save the day. And what we know, and I'm living proof because I live right here in Los Angeles, there is no emergency. There is no insurrection happening that would cause the need for a National Guard. And if there were, Gavin Newsom is more than equipped to make that call. Karen Bass is more than equipped to make that call. But what do you make of that? Let's talk about no National Guard call for the insurrectionists that were literally killed police officers. Mm-hmm. No one's died in Los Angeles. No one's been shot, maybe some minor injuries, and the Guard called up within hours.
Well, I think in Washington, D.C. at the time, I guess I was in D.C. at the time, that Nancy Pelosi actually asked for the Guard. So it's not only did he not do it, there was an ask from Congress, the congressional leader, to have the National Guard, and he did not do the National Guard that time. So that is just odd, and he's sort of living with that. With the Gavin Newsom story right now, I don't know if you've seen this because it's happened just in the last couple of hours. He's reported that he had a conversation with the governor when the governor's saying, he's never talked to me. What are you talking about? So Trump basically said on television, I had a conversation with him. I spoke to him yesterday. And then Gavin said, this guy has never spoke to me at all. So it's sort of a weird situation where you have someone who can't deal with the reality of the facts of what's sort of happening in that situation. And the fact that timeline-wise, the situation was de-escalating before the National Guard even arrived on the point, and the president took credit for the de-escalation and claimed it was the National Guard, when in fact it was the California police who had already resolved it. And then he escalated up with the Guard, and then Pete, at the request of Homeland Security, is now sending 700 officers there to, I don't know, do what. Where?
Yeah, thank you for pointing out yet another lie. Karen Bass pointed that out as well, as Donald Trump was taking credit for getting the protests, quote unquote, under control with the National Guard. The National Guard had not even arrived in the city of Los Angeles. And I just caution everyone, do not believe what you're hearing coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, out of Stephen Miller's mouth, out of Fox News, out of so many of the Trump mouthpieces that are just creating more chaos and spreading disinformation. There are even photographs, Alan, on the internet of burning police cars that people are attaching to the protests that were happening downtown Los Angeles, and there were no burning police cars. These are photos from some, I don't know, protests that happened 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. So in this this era of disinformation, people have to be so clear to check the sources, check them once, check them twice, check them 3 times before you spread anything on the internet yourself, before you share stories, before you share pictures, because there's a lot of disinformation that's happening. I do want to, before I let you go, ask you about the use of surveillance, drones, unmarked officers. I mean, there's just a lot of fear, rightfully so, in the immigrant community right now in LA because of the use of all of these, really scary tactics.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, it is the new sort of way they're doing enforcement. They're also doing it at the border in sort of this way of doing mass. I think smart immigration is great, and sort of surveillance is okay in certain places. Every American, you might as well get used to this new surveillance work, because there are cameras in LA. There's cameras on every corner, regardless of if you're doing it for the state or from some store, you're being captured. So be smart about that concept. If you are undocumented, it's time to think about where you want to live and how you want to live if you want to remain in the country. And there are options if you think that it's just too much stress for you every day that you can't survive, to think about other places, because there are other places. But the message that it sends, right? Because, it's sort of a tone all at the same time. He attacks one of the most popular universities that you happen to have attended, Harvard. He attacks the biggest state within the union as these test cases against presidential power. And what it does is it hurts the American footprint around the world. So now tourism is down, right? We have the FIFA Cup coming. A lot of those people were supposed to be coming to California. They don't want to come, right? Foreign nationals are saying this is not a place to be safe, right? You have Latin American countries saying, why would you ever go to the United States? That is economic dollars for businesses. I mean, tourism is one of the lead things that happens in this country from around the world during the summer, and the numbers just aren't there anymore, along with these crazy travel bans, which mostly hit African countries and Muslim-based countries. So when you boil all this together, what the sum of it is he wants to flex his power. But the message that he's sending about immigration is he wants white immigrants, just like the Afrikaners he allowed in 2 trips of them. And then even when he was in a fight with Elon Musk, he said, there is no genocide there. So if he says on Twitter there's no genocide, but he just allowed in 100 refugees saying that there was genocide, rushed them to a green card, right, in every capacity, it is sending you a clear message. One day you have them saying, we need you to have more children, but at the same time, they're deporting U.S. children who are born to foreign nationals. All that stuff should be a clear message to people of color saying he's really trying to reconstruct the genealogy of the United States at this point, because it was going to be a brown nation pretty soon.
And I'm so glad to hear you say this, Alan. People may not know, and you've told me, so I'm going to repeat it, that you were formerly a Republican. So a lot of the arguments that you make are economic arguments, because we remember a time in this country when Republicans were the fiscally conservative party, and individuals, were focused on the debt, right? The amount of the debt of the U.S. government, and on, reeling in programs that they thought were too expensive, that bloated the government. And now we have a Republican Party that is, to hell with credit card. Yeah, let's open the bank account and have unlimited debt. And then the irony of Elon Musk and Donald Trump and this bromance, until this big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump calls for eliminates tax subsidies for electric vehicles. And Elon Musk would take a huge hit to his entire automobile empire, and now the attacks coming from Elon Musk. So it's just so important that people understand all of this boils down to dollars and cents, and not for the American people, not for what's good for everyday people or working people, but what's good for the top, earners in this country, the ultra rich, not just the rich, but the ultra rich, the billionaire class like Elon Musk. And he was willing to go along with everything, fire thousands and thousands of U.S. workers, decimate
100,000 Black women.
Yes, just decimate departments. But the minute those subsidies for those electric vehicles were touched, then all of a sudden he had a problem. And now we see all the name calling and the petty squabbling between these grown men. And on immigration, as you're saying, no Republicans standing up, even if they hate immigrants, saying this is going to cost the U.S. government billions and billions of dollars. Like you said, 6 officers to arrest one law-abiding, individual that's in this country is absolutely absurd. And yet, Alan, Republicans are pretty quiet. We got Republican congresspeople in California saying they are applauding Trump. He's making California great again. They're not talking about the budget.
The right way. I don't think people are seeing the right. Let me proffer one more thing to you, because I think it's important to know that there's a choice. The other thing that could happen is they could have passed an immigration bill the same way that Ronald Reagan did, that fines individuals who've been here, who pay a fine, who are able to document themselves, which would be cheaper than removing them from the workforce. So there are other options. Both of the Bushes, the same thing. They offered a different way to sort of deal with immigration. So there are options that don't include these roundup situations where you have to remove people, because most of them have been here for 10 to 15 years. So when people start saying, well, all we got to do is remove them, no, you can also give them a chance to legalize themselves, to show some equity if they've been here for 7, 5 years. The cruelty.
I just want to read through a couple of rights that people have. That this is a graphic from the mayor of Los Angeles. She posted this on social media, and I just want to see if there's anything you want to add to this before I let you go. She says, if officers ask you a question, you have the right to say, I choose to remain silent. You have the right to consult with an attorney before answering any questions or signing any documents. We saw a guy who said he thought he was signing some kind of COVID vaccine consent, and he was actually signing a consent to be deported. So really, really important about signing documents. Number 3, if you have valid U.S. immigration documents, carry them with you. You said that as well. Never, ever carry false documents or lie about your immigration status. I'm sure you'll agree with that. And number 4, no law enforcement officer can enter your home without your permission unless that officer has a warrant signed by a judge. We talked about that. An administrative warrant from the Department of Homeland Security does not give officers the right to enter your home against your will. Is there anything else that you would add to that list of rights?
That's a good list. That's a great list. I think the other thing that you should know is that you should have a plan. If you're someone who's undocumented at this point, your family should have a routine that if you wind up disappeared, that someone knows that you're disappeared so they can start looking for you. The problem with the immigration bar is, just like with Mr. Garcia did not talk to his attorney for the first time until yesterday. So that's 3 months of the government keeping him from his attorney. It is really difficult for us to reach our clients in detention centers because they are overcrowded and they're privately run, and it's not set up in such a way that the individual can reach, even those who have attorneys can reach them, and those without attorneys have the capabilities. One of the other cruel things that he did was he removed the Know Your Right trainings that would happen at these facilities. And he also doesn't do anything in Spanish or any other language other than English, which is just inappropriate in every way possible.
Wow. Well, I just want everyone to know and to remember that this is not about party lines. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This is about human rights. This is about the dignity and humanity of people. It's also about due process. It's about our Constitution. It's about our democracy and what we stand for as Americans. And it's about whether we're going to allow our cities to become laboratories for authoritarian tactics, if we're going to allow our cities to become militarized zones where our military that is in place to protect us from adversaries outside of our country are now going to be used to actually go to war with citizens within our states. This is about whether we're going to have a president in office that is advocating for the arrest of a governor of the state of the United States. We know he's advocated for the arrest of judges and congresspeople and now governors. Where does this end? If we don't stand up to Donald Trump, if Los Angeles doesn't stand up, if cities around this country doesn't, if we don't stand up, we can expect more. We can expect it to be even more cruel. We can expect it to even be harsher than what we are witnessing today. Thank you, Alan, for what you are doing. Thank you for the 17,000 lawyers that are part of your your cohort, those lawyers, those immigration lawyers around the country who are standing strong. Immigrant families would be lost without you. I hope families know that they are not alone, that there are organizations like the one that you are a member of and others who are fighting for them, that are standing up and are willing to go to the streets, to take it to the streets, and to use their platforms all over this country to push back on this this authoritarianism, which we are witnessing with our very eyes. Keep on being that tireless advocate, Alan. We're going to keep turning to you and leaning on you in these difficult days ahead as we try to make sense of this and as we try to help immigrant families. Many of them, as I said, are friends and neighbors, co-workers, and people who are beloved members of our community. You have been watching the Special Report. I'm Areva Martin. I want you to stay awake, stay aware, and most of all, stay empowered. If you want more information about the Special Report, follow me across all social platforms at Areva Martin. Subscribe to my YouTube page and share the Special Report.
Calling all BIPOC college students, recent college graduates, and clinicians. Here's my story about CORE, a unique workforce development program that is changing lives. My brother is the most caring person you'll ever meet. With his autism diagnosis, my family had to fight to make sure that the resources he deserved were available. That's why my goal has always been to help children with developmental disabilities and give them chances my brother may have missed. So when I heard about the CORE Fellowship, I knew immediately it was for me. The fellowship opens doors for myself and others like me. They offer training, a stipend while you're learning, job placement, and they'll pay up to $10,000 of my student loan debt. The CORE Fellowship is going to allow me to achieve my life's purpose. They care about me, so I can care about others, like my brother. Visit the website to learn more about the CORE Fellowship. Discover your core passion, your power, and your purpose. Apply today.